Thank you, Charlena. Wow, it is so great to see so many people here. On behalf of the entire Kennedy family, thank you for the amazing welcome that you have given us here in Bangladesh and here at the EMK Center. My family was introduced very briefly, but I want to just make sure I introduce them one more time because there's many, many Kennedys. But all of you should know that we are all here as the children and the grandchildren of Senator Edward M. Kennedy, the center that obviously named in honor of my late father. My son Teddy, my nephew Max, my niece Grace, my wife Kiki, and my daughter Kylie. And when the invitation came to help celebrate and mark the 50th anniversary of U.S.-Bangladeshi bilateral relations, we jumped at the opportunity because for so many years we heard my father talk about the incredible welcome that he received here in Dhaka in 1972 and the special relationship that the people of Bangladesh have with the Kennedy family, since my father was involved in the liberation struggle and tried to bring worldwide attention into what was happening in your country in the early 1970s. So we feel so honored that this center is named in recognition of my father, and particularly pleased that the center is focused on leadership development and identifying the tools and programs that can help young people in Dhaka, throughout Bangladesh, get the tools they need to be involved in the civics of this country and how to get involved and to become, you all are the future leaders of Bangladesh. You have already made such an impact. And my father believed that everyone can get involved and that people can volunteer in their local community. They can run for office in their local towns or even run for the highest political offices of their country. And so we're so pleased that the EMK Center is providing these amazing educational tools and practical things that people can do to get more involved. So we're here to talk for a few minutes on a topic that is so critically important, the topic of disability inclusion. This is not some marginal issue that only impacts a small number of people. There are 1 billion people with disabilities living around the world. The issue touches nearly every family in America, nearly every family in Bangladesh. And I got involved in this issue when I was 12 years old. Some of you may know my story. I'm a pediatric bone cancer survivor and amputee. I lost my leg when I was 12 years old, and that instantaneously made me a member of the disability community. And, you know, at the time, when the doctors told me that they were going to have to remove part of my leg, I thought that my life was over. I thought, what am I going to do now? I thought, who would possibly want to be my friend? I was 12, 13 years old. I thought, what girl would ever want to go out on a date with me? And that's how I thought. I thought that my life was over. You see, I had these ideas about disability. I had many of the same prejudices and attitudes about disability that I have worked so hard now to dispel. And little did I know that that became the defining moment in my life. Because from that moment on, I became a lawyer. I worked hard to advance what is now known as a civil rights movement. Now, when I grew up, and when many people in the United States grew up, our concept of disability, we felt sorry for people with disabilities. We wanted to help people with disabilities. We thought that people with disabilities couldn't do anything for themselves. The idea that somebody with a disability wanted to go to work and raise a family and live independently and drive their own car and go out to dinner or go to the movies. These were, this was a foreign idea, right? And for years and years, children with disabilities were told by doctors and others, you should take your child and send them to the special hospital or special institution where they can live, and we can take care of them and they will be fine. In fact, community integration, in fact, independent living was not even a goal. Was not even a goal until fairly recently. So when we talk about disability rights, all we're talking about is, what does disability rights mean? It simply means that people with disabilities deserve the same rights and opportunities as everyone else. Is that such a hard thing to understand? People with disabilities deserve the same opportunities as everyone else. But it was only until recently, I would say in the last 10 or 20 years, in fact, where where disability has come to be understood as a civil rights issue. You know, in the United States, we've had many different movements, civil rights movements, of people who've been left out. Racial and ethnic minorities who've been facing untold barriers and discrimination in the United States of America. Women who soon followed. Individuals who identify as LGBTQ also had their own movement, the gay rights movement. And so too it is that those of us in the disability community came together to organize and model our movement like these other movements, and saying it is not a person's physical or mental condition that creates the disability. It's societal's attitudes about disability that really create the disability. So I think that that was an important thing, because most people up until that time thought that it was somebody's individual problem. If your eyes and ears or your legs don't happen to work as well as they should, that it was your problem. And we need to help you solve your problem. What we're doing now is saying, no, it is not our problem. We can do fine on our own. We need to create a society that makes it fully accessible to individuals with disabilities. And this issue, by the way, of disability inclusion has been an issue of the Kennedy family for many, many years. You know, my father's sister, Rosemary, my father was the youngest of 9 children, and he grew up with his sister, Rosemary, who was born with an intellectual disability. And I think that that experience of having a sibling with an intellectual disability had a profound impact on the Kennedy family. And not just on my father, and of course my father was one of the leading figures in disability rights in the United States, but also on John F. Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy. When people ask me, why did your family spend so much time talking about human rights and civil rights? Why? You came from this family with unbelievable advantages. Why is it that your family is so dedicated to the people who are facing the greatest challenges? And I think the answer, honestly, is their experience in growing up with a sister with an intellectual disability, because they saw firsthand how she was treated differently and how she was ignored and how no one would talk to her and how she was never invited to the movies. She had a lot of trouble even making friends in school. And these are the issues that many, many children with disabilities face. And so they saw how unfair it was that their sister was being treated like this. And I think that was one of the reasons why they were so motivated to do more. And of course, my aunt Eunice Kennedy Shriver was the creator of Special Olympics International. I know there's some members of Special Olympics organizations from Bangladesh here, and it's obviously a organization created by my aunt Eunice in her own backyard, because she wanted to start a summer camp for individuals with intellectual disabilities. And she was told that this was a terrible idea. She was told that people with disabilities couldn't exercise. She was told by doctors that individuals with disabilities could not swim and they would sink to the bottom of the pool. And thank goodness my aunt, if you told my Aunt Eunice, you can't do that, well, you know what? That made her want to do it even more. If somebody told her she couldn't do something. And thank God she didn't listen to the experts. Because now we know that in Bangladesh and over 150 countries around the world, the Special Olympics movement, but it's not just about sports. It's about inclusion. It's about changing minds. And today I am involved with an organization called the American Association of People with Disabilities, AAPD. I invite you to go online, check out the work we do. We work in many of the basic issues facing people with disabilities: access to education, transportation. That's a huge, mobility issues and transportation are a huge issue among people with disabilities. Healthcare, and of course, employment. Now, when the ADA was passed, and one of the things about the American Association of People with Disabilities is we're considered a cross-disability organization. Cross-disability. That means that we represent all people with disabilities. I may be an amputee. Other board members are deaf, are blind, are wheelchair users. We have people with autism on our board. The idea is that even though we may have some unique needs in the various disability groups, we're stronger when we're together, because the many issues that impact one group impact all people with disabilities. And when the only reason why we were able to get the Americans with Disabilities Act signed over 30 years ago, and now the ADA has really been a model for the rest of the world about how to model and think about the Americans, how to make it a more inclusive society, and how to outlaw discrimination against people with disabilities. But how do you do that? And even my own father, who worked across the aisle with a number of his Republican colleagues, because after all, disability shouldn't be a political issue. It should not be a political, it should be, because every family, as I mentioned, rich, poor, no matter where you are at station in life, it impacts every single, as I mentioned before, every single family. And my father, working in collaboration with many of his Republican counterparts, were able to mobilize people, but it was only because the disability community put aside their own specific individual goals and preferences, because there are over 75 organizations in the United States, from United Cerebral Palsy to Autism Speaks to Federation of the Blind, you name it. There is an organization for every disability type. But we cannot be balkanized. We're so much stronger when we work together, and AAPD is now the umbrella organization that represents all people with disabilities in the United States. We've got a lot of work to do. We have made a lot of progress in the United States in terms of architectural accessibility, you know, the elevators, the curb cuts, and the like. But we've failed insofar as we have not meaningfully changed the number of people with disabilities who have economic independence and labor force participation. Now, roughly the same percentage of people with disabilities 30 years ago who were employed is roughly the same percentage as it is today. And that is a worldwide problem. It's not just a problem for individuals with disabilities, but it's a problem for businesses too, because we know that individuals with disabilities represent an incredible untapped resource. But as I mentioned before, people with disabilities were never thought of as a resource, never thought of as having specific strengths before. We know that's not true. And so I'm working today as a co-chair of something called the Disability Equality Index. The Disability Equality Index. I invite you all to look it up. It's really exciting. Created about 7 or 8 years ago to start benchmarking corporate progress on disability inclusion. So we now work with about 400 corporations. Many of them actually have operations here in Bangladesh. So I would encourage you to look at this list of companies, because now we grade companies. And about the best companies for disability inclusion. And we have now 67 of the Fortune 100 companies are now part of what we're trying to do. And you know what? It wasn't easy, right? People don't really want to do this because it makes them evaluate their facilities and like, what are we doing? And do we have any people with disabilities working here? And this could be really embarrassing because now we're being graded by these disability organizations about how we're doing. And do you think anyone wants to get an F on that exam? Like, you're terrible. But we started off with a number of folks, great companies, companies like American Airlines or United Airlines, for example. And you know what happened? Delta Airlines started, well, wait, what are they doing, right? And we started with JP Morgan and Bank of America, and suddenly these other banks wanted to know, well, what are they doing that we're not doing? We want to be the best. We want to be one of the leaders. So I think for those of you who are working in the area of employment, particularly of individuals with disabilities, go up and look up the DEI, the Disability Equality Index, because these are the companies, and again, many of these companies are multinational companies who are actively seeking good people, qualified people with disabilities to come join their companies, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because they know that disability inclusion leads to greater outperformance. In fact, there was a recent study called Getting to Equal, the Disability Inclusion Advantage. Now, we always knew that people with disabilities made great employees. They had less turnover. They showed up at work. It wasn't a surprise to anybody in the disability community, because we know that if somebody's just so grateful to have a job, they're going to show up 10 minutes early. Every single day. And by the way, when your employees show up 10 minutes early to your company, you're already doing better than 95% of every single employee out there, okay? And so we know now that, what the Getting to Equal report said, they looked at the companies that were in the disability index and compared them to those that were not. And what did they find? 30% financial outperformance, the companies that were the leaders in the Disability Equality Index. 4 times more likely to outperform their peers in terms of total shareholder return over time. That means that disability inclusion is the next chapter of ESG, corporate social responsibility. We've heard a lot about ESG investing. All the companies want to make sure that they're responding, obviously, to their carbon footprint and climate issues, and they also want to make sure that they're doing the right thing, because you know what? Consumers want to know that the businesses that they patronize, where they do their banking, what restaurants they eat at, what airline they fly on, they want to know, does this company stand for something? Does this company match my expectations about good corporate behavior and responsible capitalism. That's what this is about. We have the power. We have so many people, and where we decide to shop and where we decide to bring our business can be very, very powerful for businesses. So I'm actually in the United States now leading the charge, trying to make disability inclusion the next chapter of ESG. I have 30 of the largest pension funds in the United States calling on corporate America to do more. I mean, it's really, really exciting. So I know our time is out already. As you can see, I could talk on this subject for a long, long time. Let me just say this. I'll leave you with a couple of thoughts. First of all, thank you to Ambassador Haas. Thank you to the American Embassy for really prioritizing this, disability inclusion, in everything that they do here in Bangladesh and really in the State Department around the world. You know, we need to make sure that every single program that is funded by the United States of America, we provide economic aid all over the world. And we want to make sure that every penny of that aid also considers disability inclusion, because we want to promote this concept all over the world. And thank you so much for putting together this program. You know, I am so fortunate because when I travel around the world, I get to meet amazing leaders from all over the world who are doing unbelievable organizing within their organizations, teaching people about the fact that this is a right. When we talk about human rights, when we talk about civil rights, we are also talking about disability rights. A lot of people with disabilities themselves, because we grew up at this time where there were such low expectations of people with disabilities, have never themselves thought about, well, I could become a leader. Well, I can go on and be a success in corporate America. And we need to change that attitude. Are you going to work with me to do that? All right. So anyway, I am so pleased that so many people were able to come today. Again, thank you to the U.S. Embassy for helping to put together this program. My father would be so proud to know that, you know, just this morning on our way up here, for example, we saw a lab that is trying to expand digital access, computer skills for individuals with disabilities, okay? He would be so pleased to know that the EMK Center is involved in volunteerism. And he wanted to make, my dad honestly believes that every American should be, you know, when we asked for years and years, people would be drafted into the military and so forth. And my father believes that every American should provide some kind of public service. Not just in the military. If you want to serve in the military, fine. But if you don't, because he believed that it would not only be good for our nation, but it would be good for our collective in getting people with all different backgrounds all around the United States together, working on projects to improve our country. And that's how he started AmeriCorps, which is, I know, one of the you know, foundation ideas for a lot of the volunteerism that is taking place here at the EMK Center. So in conclusion, that's my favorite line in any, in any speech. No, I have just a couple of things. I'd just like to ask Farjad and Corvi to come back up here for 1 second, because I just have a little memento of appreciation for the two of you. It's a crystal bowl from the United States Senate, and it's a gift from the Kennedy family to the EMK Center. And I hope that you accept this gift as a token of our appreciation for everything